Today, we're sending a clear message that we will never give in to extortion, because that's what it was. They tried to extort, the Democrats tried to extort our country. In just a moment, I'll sign a bill exactly like we asked Democrats to send us all along, many days ago. This cost the country $1.5 trillion, this little excursion that they took us on. Republicans never wanted a shutdown and voted 15 times for a clean continuation of funding. There's never been a time when one or the other party ever didn't sign a continuation. It's just a continuation, not a big deal. It's a continuation, and we'll talk later.
How's everybody doing today? This is Attorney Antonio Moore coming to you from Tone Talks, here to have a discussion about the end of the shutdown, what really happened, what people are feeling out there, give you a chance to voice your opinion, 310-388-3499 to call in, support the channel. You can use tonetalks.net to support. We got people all across this country that come in here weekly, and we're going to be here on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But today we're talking about this shutdown, and we're talking about what concessions were made. We're talking about how did we get here? Why did this happen? It ended up being the longest shutdown in U.S. history, I think at 43 days. 43 days. Longest shutdown in U.S. history ends. Trump signs bill to reopen government after 43 days of disruption and delays. We have federal workers miss car payments, miss mortgages. We had airlines have people waiting 2 hours and 3 hours. We had lack of funding for programs. We had people go hungry for this shutdown. Most shutdowns, when you look back historically, you can look at the last show for some of those images. They were 1, 5, 10 days, if they happened at all. Under Trump's 2 presidencies, we've had 2 of the longest shutdowns in U.S. history. I believe that is a representation of the awfulness of Trump's politics, but also the need for a third party and the need for more dynamic politics, because there's a issue here, an issue where the haves and the have-nots are not on the same walking force, and there are a lot more have-nots, and we need to be much louder. How is everybody doing today in the chat? 310-388-3499 to hear from you. Let me set this show up, and we're going to talk about the shutdown. But we're not only going to talk about the shutdown. We're going to also segue into talking about the 50-year mortgage that he proposed. He proposed a number of economic tools to try to get people out of struggle that don't make any sense. $2,000 to those families that make less than $100,000. Well, what if you have asset of a home worth $1 million and your income is $35,000 or $40,000, suppressed by the fact that you've chosen not to have that, whether it be retirement or anything else? Why would you get $2,000? Okay, we're going to talk about that 50-year mortgage and when the interest rates, how the interest rates will change, and also how that affects principal over time. We're going to have a discussion about how much of what Trump has proposed doesn't make any sense. But let's get right into this longest shutdown in U.S. history ending. Trump signed a bill ending the longest government shutdown. I just showed a video of what he was saying at the end. He said that, well, nothing really happened. It was 43 days and they didn't get much concession. Understand again that the backdrop of this, and I want everybody to understand that the backdrop of this is the backbone of your community and your family. It is the subsidies for Obamacare so you can afford health care for your families. It is the reality of having food stamps available to the hungry in your family and around you in your neighborhood. It is the means and the lifeblood to push back against the wealth class that is clawing back and saying, we can care less about how you live. That is the fight that was the backdrop of the shutdown. And that is the question. Did the Democrats fold before they got enough of a pushback on all of the cataclysmic policy? I talked about how they went down from 18 years old to 14 years old for able-bodied people with a child to get SNAP food assistance. Why would you give SNAP to a person with a 14-year-old, but not a person with a 15-year-old? Huh. Okay. The U.S. government will reopen. He signed it. Chris said they folded big time. Okay. So it was some rogue senators that went out and folded And we have 18 tweets that sum up how upset people are with the Democrats who sided with Republicans. Now, me, myself, I'm far left. I wrote on inequality.org for several years as a hobby for free to inform people about not only the racial wealth chasm or gap, as it's called, but also about the state of wealth in America at large for all Americans that struggle day to day to feed their families. And I believe that the Democrats are not doing enough to represent that far left view. For decades, we've had the neoliberals. We had Obama, we had Biden, we had Clinton, we had center left folks. We need far left folks on everything, not some things. 18 tweets that sum up how upset people are with the Democrats who sided with Republicans on a government shutdown. So 310-388-3499. I got all set up and then didn't realize I had left off the call-in studio. Nonetheless, 18 tweets that sum up how upset people are with the Democrats who sided with Republicans on a government shutdown. So in your personal circles, you may be hearing about people who feel this way. I want to give you a chance to voice your opinion. You don't have to agree with this. You can have your own opinion. You may agree with it like someone did just earlier in the chat. A Democratic cave now after Tuesday's clean sweep is about the dumbest thing I can imagine. Now, I didn't pull all 18 tweets from this article, but I did pull several. And I want to read several to you to give you the energy that we're seeing across the Twitterverse. I was convinced the Republicans would cave by the holidays. By the time this snap stuff started. Now, let me say one thing. There is a truth here that you have to be honest about, where you have local Democrats, or these are senators, but you have people that are seeing people not eat. You have people being pushed by the fact that people aren't eating. And sometimes we can get so far into blaming the people that say, I want the people that we forget the people that took the food away. Let's not forget the far right in our chastising of the Democrats. This is a cabal, but in actuality, it is Trump mechanizing the fact that we want to see people with their bellies full in an effort to take away the fact that we have grocery stores full of food. Can we talk? I was convinced the Republicans would cave by the holidays. By the time this snap stuff started, Trump, and by relation, the Republicans truly became the face of this shutdown. And then those effing Democrats had to go and do this S. Feckless losers with weak leadership. And I'm in agreement that they should have continued pushing, but I'm saying that as somebody of privilege who has food in my refrigerator, I would like to hear from, and it's kind of hard because I know people went through. You got to go out and talk to people that didn't eat because they weren't getting their SNAP and see how they feel. It's easy when you can eat to say that stuff, but it's much different when you got to look at your kids and they going hungry. Now, I believe the Democrats should have kept going. But again, I say that from a position of some privilege as a professional. Number two, a Democratic cave now after Tuesday's clean sweep is about the dumbest thing I can imagine. Jack Cochibrella, what the F are you saying? This is the fight, this fight, this fight. Number six, very cool that Dems had all the leverage in the world after Tuesday's election, and they just decided to completely cave to nearly all the Republican demands in exchange for what amounts to a pinky promise. So there's this promise around the Obamacare subsidies. Understand, again, as I showed you in the last show, there are many changes to SNAP food stamps that have already went into effect as of November 1st because of the bill that was passed by Donald Trump. In those changes, there's a new requirement about able-bodied people that could lead to people that need help because of disabilities or having children that are 15, 16, 17 that may be cut off of food stamps. There is a war at hand. Don't get lost in the battle as you forget. Don't get lost in the battle and forget the war. Can we talk today? Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? 814.
Hello?
814. Let me read a couple more of these tweets and then I'm gonna come right to you. It really is a mystery why the Democratic Party approval rating is so low. We may never figure it out. I think this was sarcasm. So to sum up, Democrats had a strong week at the polls and are ending it by agreeing to a deal that was on offer weeks ago without anything they were demanding. Give me your take on this whole thing.
One thing I feel bad that the Democrats came the way they did.
Well, One thing before,
Black
what's your
folks
what's
would
your
have
name?
actually got.
What's your name and where you calling from? I apologize, I didn't get that initially.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No,
Of
it's my
course,
fault.
I'm from Philly. I've called them before. I've been following the show for many years. I appreciate you. I'm also a part of the movement. I'm part of the program. So I'm on board with everything. And my is the Democrats shouldn't have paid, but at the same time, we don't have enough black people, black folks that are fighting, getting in the middle of street support. Maybe if we, like black women, need food stamps and got so many, we have so many black folks right now that believe in what's said on Fox News about welfare mothers. It's almost like black people believe in what Trump was doing. As crazy as that might sound, that's what they come across, and I don't think black people were mad enough and upset enough to back the Democrats enough for them to do what they need to do.
You know, I was just saying something similar. I believe coming out of the political emptiness in a way. You know, Cosby Show, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, they avoided politics at its core. That was part of the compromise to be on television. There also was this rise of the respectability black professional post-Reagan. And inside of that ethos, what ended up happening is also this rise of a conservative, but you don't have nothing to conserve or very limited. So you are protecting a white ecosystem by virtue of blaming victims that are victims of a legacy of oppression and then trying to dismiss the oppression and saying basically get over it without saying it. And I think you're speaking to that now because what became the narrative is the welfare mama, but what we came to understand is there is no welfare mama. There's just people that need welfare. Give me your last take on it.
We got two generations now that actually believe Section 8 and welfare creates power. My issue is Asians don't complain about that. Latinos don't complain about that. We literally blame government programs for poverty. Nobody else does that.
Hey, all I know is that at the end of the day, it's a lot of people in the Netherlands and out there in Europe getting a lot of programming. They perfectly fine with it. I'm going to let you go. Caller, thank you so much. Starting off the show, 310-388-3499. We are having this discussion. We started off with Trump talking about this so-called compromise, saying it's just business as usual. He didn't even see it as a compromise. We have these tweets that came out, and there's a whole discussion being had about how the Democrats folded. But we also have this backdrop that people were going hungry. Now, I myself understand how we get to a point where hungry people can push people to compromise where they didn't intend to. But what we can't lose sight of is blaming Democrats for a choice made by Trump's administration and the far right. I need you guys to understand it, particularly y'all folks who voted for Donald Trump. But inside of this compromise were other things, as they always do, that we see in this. And this is just one example, see in this bill or this passage of this post-shutdown. Shutdown deal kills food safety rules. After lobbyists spent big on the Trump administration and Democratic defectors, the government funding bill cut food contamination rules and limited ultra-processed food research. So they packed in at the bottom of this agreement other things that we don't even know about. We need to start knowing about things like this right here, and many of the other things that have been packed into this shutdown deal. Newsom is coming out firing. For those people that don't know who Newsom is the governor of California. He was behind the reparations push here. As you know, I testified as one of two lead experts initially to even get the idea of reparations on the California platform. I testified at the Senate. And so Newsom had to sign to actually make it a discussion. Now, you can be mad about how far it went, but what you got to understand is look across this country and see where that discussion got further. This is the biggest state, the least damn near black state, and the discussion got further here. Ask yourself how it got further. Newsom tells AP the 8 senators who struck the shutdown deal aren't alarmed enough about Trump. So you have him coming out swinging. As you know, California passed Prop 50. Shout out to Newsom for getting that passed. I voted in favor. so that we can push back against this gerrymandering, against the limited districts of Democrats that largely, and you can sit around and say that I'm not for the Democrats, but what you got to do is go down to Mississippi and go into these small districts in Louisiana and understand the difference between a Republican and a Democrat for a lot of those folks. You got to go into places and really look at the policy differences. We just saw it with the SNAP difference. They would starve your cousin to death and then say, well, we just doing it because ain't no funding. Okay. I'm talking about the Republicans. California Governor Gavin Newsom said Tuesday he's stunned by 8 senators' decision to break with Democrats and end the government shutdown, and warned they're not alarmed enough about President Donald Trump's political norm shattering. I'm not coming in to punch anybody in the face. This is Newsom's words, but I'm not pleased that in the face of this invasive species that is Donald Trump, who's completely changed the rules of the game. And when he says that, what we see with Donald Trump right now, we see it with tariffs. Tariffs are power. Taxation is a power that is supposed to be in the legislative branch. But you see Donald Trump usurping that power to the point where we're going to see the Supreme Court, in my view, tell him that the executive branch is not in charge of tariffs. You see him pushing around into branches that he should have no control over, who's completely changed the rules of the game, that we're still playing by the old rules of the game. Newsom told the Associated Press in an interview, Newsom was asked what he would say to the group of 7 Democrats and 1 independent senator who joined the Republicans in the Senate late Monday to pass legislation to reopen the government, bringing the longest shutdown in history closer to an end. Along with the ratified deal came searing criticism for the moderates from other Democrats, frustrated by what they said amounted to caving to the GOP without achieving lasting progress toward extending health care subsidies set to expire January 1st. This is the war I was talking about. As news of potential compromise neared ahead of procedural Sunday night vote to advance the overall funding legislation, Newsom's press office wrote on X, pathetic. This isn't a deal, it's a surrender. Don't bend the knee. After the same 8 senators, 7 Democrats and independent Senator Angus King of Maine, who caucuses with the Democrats, joined with Republicans in a procedural vote, he called their conciliation capitulation and a betrayal of the working Americans. I believe they should have held up. I believe that they should have held out, got concessions when it comes to these subsidies so these families can afford their health care. They should have got more concessions when it comes to food stamps. They should have got more protections to make sure that Donald Trump stays in his lane in the executive branch. But again, too many of y'all voted for Donald Trump. That's why he in office. 310-388-3499. I'm not going to keep you long. We're going to talk about this shutdown. We're going to get in and out of here. I see people all across the country having this discussion. And we in the chat. Can we have this talk? Okay. We are here today. So he went on the View, and Sonny Hostin, Senator John Fetterman, one of the Democrats that made the concession, went on the View, and Sonny Hostin confronted him for siding with the GOP. Hostin brought up her feeling that more Americans on both sides of the aisle are blaming Republicans for the historic 6-week shutdown. And again, it was 43 days. That is the longest in history. The second longest was during Trump's first term. And even brought up Georgia Rep. Marjorie Taylor, who also blamed the GOP, Hostin said. She then brought up last week's blue wave that saw key Democratic wins in many local elections at the polls, telling Senator Fetterman that you had momentum before asking, why give in now? Why bring a butter knife to a gunfight? Are you willing to gamble that the GOP will negotiate in good faith once the government reopens? Because if that gamble is wrong, 500,000 Pennsylvanians that you represent, their healthcare costs will skyrocket if you're wrong. And I believe you are wrong. Okay. I had this post put up by Princess, one of my admins out of Atlanta, out of Georgia there. And she talked about the ratchet effect. Now I went in and got a description of the ratchet effect, a definition of sorts. But on this ratchet effect that she has, the ratchet effect, how you are being duped by the fake two-party system, you have the Republicans turn everything to the right, and you have the Democrats block. The ratchet effect is a concept in sociology and economics illustrating the difficulty with reversing a course of action once a specific thing has occurred. Analogous with the mechanical ratchet, that allows movement in one direction and seizes or tightens in the opposite. The concept has been applied to multiple fields. So you have the Republicans ratcheting everything to the right and the Democrats blocking the movement back to the far left. Interesting concept. Interesting concept. So that's the shutdown. I wanted to talk about, as we looked at the shutdown and that news came out, we have the Epstein files as well. That's a whole nother discussion, but we have that. So we have all of this bad news around Trump. So in an effort to change the subject, Trump started throwing out these economic policies that didn't make any sense. We're going to focus today on the 50-year mortgage, but he did about 3 of them. The first one he did was the 50-year mortgage. He also did $2,000 tariff rebate checks. And then he did one more. Let me just talk about it. 50-year mortgage. What is Trump proposing? On Saturday, Trump took to his Truth Social network to post side-by-side portraits of himself and Franklin D. Roosevelt beneath the banner, Great American Presidents. Okay, we talking about FDR, post-depression. We talking about Trump, creator of a depression, in my view, or pushing us into one. Okay, under FDR were the words 30-year mortgage, and under Trump was the 50-year mortgage. 2 days later, Fox News' Laura Ingraham Trump asked Trump whether a 50-year mortgage is really a good idea to lower housing costs that are still out of reach for many Americans. What do experts say? Experts point out 2 downsides of a 50-year mortgage. The first is that mortgage payments also include interest, so the more payments you have, the more interest you pay. In fact, estimates show that a 50-year borrower would pay about twice as much interest as a 30-year borrower. For most U.S. home buyers, that equals a few $100,000 extra dollars. Then we had $2,000 tariff checks. What is Trump proposing? For months, Trump has mused about sending every American a rebate from what he described as the trillions of dollars in tariff revenue. Trump has long considered tariffs a cure for all for the U.S. economy, vowing it will stop foreign governments from ripping us off. So what he proposed, and I don't want to read this whole thing, the administration has proposed various other uses for the new tariff revenue, including reducing the country's deficit and offsetting the cost of GDP, tax and spending bill. Trump signed into law in July, but $2,000 rebate checks have taken center stage. So what he wants to do, as I understand, send $2,000 to I guess households that make less than $100,000. Well, how does that help if you have older generations that may be retired and their income is suppressed because they're living off of pensions, or in addition, they have paid off their housing, and they're going to get $2,000, but a working class family with 2 incomes that make $60,000 each, they don't get any of it. Then their money, those families that are working, becomes worth less because you have infused capital into the environment where they're competing against free dollars. Okay, that free dollars that might be given to people who have low incomes but high asset valuation. How about we check assets before we decide who to give it out to, and give it out to people with less assets versus less income? Okay, direct healthcare payments. This is another one. Instead of keeping the Obamacare subsidies for low-income families, he wants to talk about giving the money directly to people so then they can go negotiate with the hospitals. My view is we are not equipped individually to negotiate with hospitals on each thing. This is not well thought out. This man is not well thought out. I want to get to it. 214, caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
He's calling from Texas.
Give me your take on it.
I think that this is a classic example of this is what you ordered, so eat it. For all the people who wanted to identify with him because they thought that he had their best interest at heart, this is yours, so eat up. This guy is a maniac. To be honest, I'm starting to think that calling him a racist is letting him off too easy. I think this guy's a maniac who hates everybody who isn't going to kiss his ring and funnel money to him. You're talking about a 50-year mortgage. You might as well buy a home when you turn 13. We're going somewhere where it's going to be trillionaires and no one else.
Come on, caller. Any last thing you want to say? Because I'm going to get into this 50-year mortgage. I did a series of tweets on it because I was noticing everybody was talking about it real flat. When I say real flat, they were looking at the numbers, but they were looking at it like you're going to get the same interest rate for a 50 like you get for a 30. That's not the way it happens. But give me your last take because I'm going to get right into this 50-year mortgage.
On top of that, I think with the healthcare subsidies, the southern states are the states that didn't want people to have
Come
because
on.
most of the southern states are the ones that opted out of the Medicare expansion. I mean, these people, they just don't want people to eat or have health insurance or have a mortgage.
Give me your thoughts. You came with that fire. Thank you. So look, let's get right into this 50-year mortgage and how nonsensical it is. Part of what I try to do on this show is take people that may work for a living, don't have time. Take people who might think something is good because it glitzes and glimmers in the light, and show them the truth of it. Because the truth of it is this is no good. No way, no matter how you turn it. So I want to give the backdrop on how this actually transpired, so you understand what I meant earlier about him looking under every rock to get some good news. So this wasn't even organized as it's being reported. On Saturday evening, Polt arrived at President, and this is the guy behind it. White House officials are reportedly furious with Bill Polt, the Federal Housing Finance Agency director, who talked the president into suggesting a 50-year mortgage plan, per Politico. On Saturday evening, Polt arrived at President Donald Trump's Palm Beach Golf Club with a roughly 3x5 poster board. So he's showing up like, yo, kids, remember when we was young and we did the science project? He got a science project in hand. Dasha and Sophia report a graphic of former President Franklin Roosevelt appeared below 30-year mortgage and one of Donald Trump below 50-year mortgage. Because Donald Trump has been so awful, the gravity of misstep that this is getting lost. This is a cataclysmic misstep in terms of just understanding economics that many presidencies could never survive. But we got a guy who's dealing with Epstein issues, who is a felon, who has a cataclysmic history when it comes to caring about the poor or races of all kinds, who has ICE tackling people on the ground. You got a whole lot going on with him. So the truth of this gets lost, but this is ignorant beyond ignorant. I'm going to show you why. And guess what? Roughly 10 minutes later, Trump posted the image to Truth Social, according to one of the people familiar. So 10 minutes, the president of America saw this as a science project 10 minutes before he reposted it. Okay. So these are my tweets in response to the 50-year mortgage. What real Donald Trump is proposing is financial ignorance. Look at the comparative amortization schedules. On a $500K home at 6.5% interest, by year 6 under a 50-year loan, you have paid $200,000 in payments, and the principal has only come down $10,000. So what am I saying? So when you look at the amortization schedule, year 6 of a loan, year 6 of a 30-year loan, you already have paid off $40,000 out of your first whatever $200,000. But when you look at a 50-year loan, here it is 50 years, and here goes the full schedule. By year 6, you've paid that same $200,000 nearly, but you've only paid off $10,000 of the actual principal. So you paid $190,000 in interest. This is basically renting with all the responsibility of ownership for the first 25 years of your purchase. You can't even sell this thing and make money for it. You got to be in there 20 years. I need you to understand what I'm saying. This is debt. This is debt servitude of the sort. Because what ends up happening here is, whether you understand it or not, these huge payments, and these are huge payments of $2,800 a month, are not doing anything to decrease the principal and give you ownership. But at the same time, the water heater is still going out and the roof still has holes in it. So in the end, what happens is you can't even take a loan against equity because there is no equity, or just giving money to the bank. So you're going to work every month. You're telling everybody that you're a homeowner, but in reality, you are just a renter with the responsibilities of ownership until you get to year 25 or 30. Look at the principal. Look at this. Year 6, $490 still owed. On a 30-year loan, year 6, $460 owed. Now this is just presuming nothing down, so I'm just giving a flat. But the other part that ends up happening is the young should be livid at older boomer generations that have been setting this type of craze up via policy since Reagan. So this is a long-term play all the way to Trump. Not Trump is the conclusion, not the start. Imagine this: $3,500 mortgage. People be like, "Oh, I can't agree." Now look at this too. On a 30-year mortgage, your loan is $3,100. By going to 50 years, you only decrease by $300. But I need to add in another part about the interest rate that may eat up part of that 300 as well. But $300, $3,500 mortgage, $1,400 car payments, meaning you and your wife, and then you add in the insurance. Don't add in kids having a car. $2,500 child care, $1,000 for your student loans that you still paying, $1,000 for credit. That's $9,400 a month. How can people survive? The problem is not loan links. This is another tweet I did. It is that many policies from NIMBY. How many people in the chat have heard the term NIMBY? If you've heard NIMBY, please type what it means in the chat. It is a set of policies enacted by boomers primarily to ensure that their quality of life exists at the cost of building more inventory, because that's the problem. Inventory. Let me show you what I mean. It's inventory that's the problem. I want you to watch this video and understand what I mean.
Now, for millions of Americans, buying a home is financially out of reach. Today, this number might surprise you. The average age of a first-time home buyer is a record high, 40 years old. That is why President Trump says he is proposing what his administration is calling, quote, a complete game changer, a 50-year fixed-rate mortgage. So what does that actually mean for you? Well, spreading out payments could lower your costs compared to a 30-year loan, maybe as much as $200 a month. But there's a very big trade-off. You could end up paying as much as double in interest. And the banks, well, they're also likely to charge even higher rates because the loan is going to take a whole lot longer to pay off. And if the goal is to bring more buyers into the market, but the number of homes stays the same, well, guess what's likely going to happen? Prices are going to go up. Not to mention, who wants to wait until they're 90 years old, right? If your first time you're buying a house, you're 40, you ain't paying it off until you're 90. That's a lot of time. Back with us tonight, Bharat Ramamurthy, former National Economic Council Deputy Director and author of The Bully Pulpit on Substack. And Bill Cohen is here, former Wall Street banker turned journalist and founding partner at Puck. Okie doke. Paying for your home every month until you're 90 years old? Call me a simple girl from New Jersey. That sounds like rent to me.
This proposal makes absolutely no sense at all. Obviously, 30-year mortgages, the rates are much higher than 7-year mortgages, 10-year mortgages. And if people stop for a minute and say to themselves, oh, my monthly payment may be lower with a 50-year mortgage, the amount of interest they're going to pay over the course of 50 years at higher interest rates is going to make the cost of their home, 4 or 5 times the original purchase price in interest payments alone over 50 years? Who wants to do that?
Okay, Bill, Bharat, when I saw this today, all I could think of was the dozens of Today Show segments we have done talking to people about paying down your credit card debt because you don't want to be paying interest every month because it's going to take you a lifetime to pay down your credit cards. And now that's what they're potentially offering to first-time home buyers. But even if it brought down your monthly mortgage payments, it still doesn't resolve the issue of inventory. And here's the problem with building new homes. Donald Trump's tariffs are only making home building way more expensive. How does any of this make sense?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just to put some specific numbers behind Bill's point, if you take the average home price right now, it's about $400,000 in the United States. You take a 6% interest rate, which is what your 30-year rate is right now. If you use a 50-year mortgage instead of a 30-year mortgage, yes, you're saving about $200 a month on your monthly payment, but you know how much more you're paying over the life of the mortgage? $320,000.
So the problem is not loan links, is that many policies from NIMBY, not in my backyard policy, enacted by an older generation to make sure that housing was suppressed because of the lack of building housing and keeping them in a state of scarcity so they could sell for more. To the raising of estate tax start points, we talked about estate tax. It was started at $600,000 in the 90s, in the early 90s. It doesn't start They don't start breaking up estates until 50, I think it's 15 per person, 30 million, 15 million per person, 30 million for a couple. That creates a whole different set of pressures on asset acquisition than we've ever seen in the history of the world in this nation. And Craig's property tax that artificially create value and being boomer age. We see that in California, Prop 13, where basically property tax is next to nothing for older generations because it's based on when you bought the home and it only went up a point and a half. So we see all of those things. That's what creates the increase in valuation of homes, in my view. And a 50-year mortgage doesn't fix any of that. The other thing people are not considering is the cost on a 50-year loan to hold that risk. So if you listen to the first young man that spoke with the gray hair, this is one thing that I think was missing in the general discussion, because people correctly were talking about the increase in interest because of the time, but what they were not also assessing was that when you look at closely at and I pulled from Optimum as an example, the 15-year versus the 30-year fixed. Their 15-year fix is 5.1, but their 30-year fix is 5.5. If their 30-year fix is 5.5, that's, let's call it a half point just for the sake of it. If you go from 30 to 50 and also adding in the fact that a lot of 30-year borrowers still are high credit, good jobs, I think you would likely end up in a point where the 50-year individual is a high risk individual. So I could see that going to a 0.75 to even a point of increase in your loan rate. So imagine that a 50-year loan that's a 30-year loan is at 6.5, but a 50-year loan is at 7.5. Now the question becomes, does that $200-300 payment difference really stay there? And how much more interest then are you paying over the course of the loan with the additional point in addition? That may even offset the payment gains shown above. Look at the interest rate jump from 15-year to 30-year loan lengths. That's like half a point. The use case for 50-year loans, meaning for high-risk individuals, may call for even a full point or even more. These are the discussions that aren't being had. So as we look at this shutdown, as we look at this discussion, as we look at the economic glitz and glamour things that are being pushed on us, we must stay vigilant in our understanding. We must talk in our community. We must inform our children, our wives, our husbands, our mothers, our fathers. We must have these discussions and build to our understanding that this shutdown really might not have amounted to much of nothing at all except a lot of chaos. Thank you so much for tuning in.